Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, David Strege, and I'm going to give the reins over here to Katie because she has endeavored to host tonight's film discussion. So, Katie, you have the floor.
Katie's our host tonight.
Thanks. Hi, welcome to another episode of Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, Katie Cadaver, and I am joined by our usual crew. I think everybody's here tonight. We have fellow dead girl, Red Raven.
Hi.
Hi. Our horror collector extraordinaire, Dustin. You're supposed to say hi when I say your name.
Oh, I'm saying hi now.
There you go.
Because you went into insane echo mode.
Hi. Oh, sorry about that. Well, we also have our YouTube sensation, Stephenson.
Hello.
Hi. And our resident Kyle.
Hi.
Hi, Dane. Our Kabuki Jake.
Hi.
And our usual host, David Strage.
Hello, everyone.
So, Joe D'Amato's 1979 film, Buio Omega, and also known as Buried Alive.
And Beyond the Dark.
And spoiler warning, I said that. Spoiler warning, we will be discussing many aspects of the film. This is your official warning. So, I am really excited to talk about this movie. It happens to be probably one of my favorite film discoveries of 2000. Right into a synopsis about the film. It starts out with a young rich taxidermist who loses his fiancée to some voodoo magic on the part of his jealous older housekeeper. And in an attempt to keep his fiancée with him forever, he digs up her body, guts her, stuffs her, and essentially turns her into a doll that he keeps in his house. He also finds himself killing and disposing of several other young women throughout the film with the help of his deranged housekeeper, who seems to be driven by her unnatural attraction to him. I've heard it referred to as the ultimate spaghetti splatter flick, and the tagline is "a fate worse than death." So this is, for me, this wasn't a first watch, but it was a first watch very recently. I actually discovered it through another podcast, the Blood Brothers Horror Podcast. They do a little segment called From the Grave or something like that, where they talk about movies that may have been forgotten or things you may not have seen. And they talked about this movie, and the way they described it, I was immediately intrigued, and it sounded like a film that I would absolutely dig. So I checked it out actually on YouTube, and it was everything that I'd hoped for. The effects were just superb, in my opinion, and the tone is extremely grim and set to excellent music. So it's totally my kind of movie. So I guess we're going to go around, and I'll ask you all if it was a first-time watch and what you thought. So we can start with Red Raven. Was this a first-time watch for you, Red Raven?
Yeah, this was a first-time watch, and I really liked it. I thought it was really gruesome, and it wasn't what I expected of this movie at all. It was good. I love the music with it, the goblin music, and I don't know. I loved everything about it.
Awesome. Dustin, how about you? First time watch?
Oh yeah, you talked about this movie off and on for the past few months, and so it was kind of like, oh yeah, we're finally gonna get to see that. And so I booted it up. It was discoverable on YouTube for some reason. So it's kind of funny. So I just searched for it on YouTube, and the one I found was a half hour shorter than the correct one, and it wasn't dubbed. So I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, there were no subtitles. It was just all in Italian.
Oh, you have to send me that link. Please send me that link so I can just check it out.
I will. I ended up finding the one that everybody else was using, and it was like, oh, okay, now it works. And what was kind of nice about that one was it had a 2-hour runtime, and the last half hour was clearly from some special features thing where they were watching a couple scenes and like talking with one of the actresses. And that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it was a first time watch. I am not as familiar with Amato's work. Besides, I saw Anthropophagus, or whatever.
Anthropophagus.
Yep, also known as the Grim Reaper.
It was weird, and this was also weird. I mean, I thought it was fine. It felt almost like a standard kind of Italian movie to me. Just bizarre, intense violence, like great music, and a plot that I couldn't really follow the first time I saw it. That happens with all of the Italian films. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, they're worth a second watch, definitely.
Oh, they are.
Dane. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. Go
okay. I was going to ask Dane, was this a first time watch for you too?
Yes, it was. I haven't seen. Well, it's funny because like if anybody out there has watched The Cinema Snob, then you're familiar with Joe D'Amato's work by proxy because he's reviewed a lot of them. Like Erotic Nights of the Living Dead and things like that. I mean, he's made a whole lot of films of very different kinds. So, this is my first time seeing one of his films properly, and honestly, I didn't really like it. I think that the music was great because it's Goblin, but it didn't really seem like it had a whole lot more to it beyond just kind of being trashy and gruesome and things like that. And it I don't know. I did like some of the practical effects of like what they had with the I think it was cow intestines was what they actually used, but it just I don't know. It didn't, and it was rather slow despite the short run time, and it just I don't know. It didn't really grab me in a way that I would necessarily say like this is a classic. I tend to try and find a deeper meaning to things if I can. Well,
this one's definitely a lot more style over substance, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's kind of my issue with a lot of the Italian films that we've watched, and particularly the Giallo films. And I keep feeling bad whenever I say that because I feel like, oh, I'm just, not understanding the genre, and that may very well be true. I just, it does seem like with a lot of the ones that we've watched, that there is a lot of style over substance. There's a lot of good technique in spots and particularly good music, but just particularly with the Giallo films, a lot of overacting and a lot of just certain things that kind of reek of phoniness to me. And this one wasn't so much that style of acting; it was just more that there wasn't a whole lot to it. And apparently, not a lot of dialogue.
I think I was intrigued by it just because it was so gruesome. I mean, they were doing things that were just so gruesome that I was just more intrigued by it.
Yeah, but I tend to like violence in film, but I dislike it when it's just violence for its own sake and when it's more about how gross can we be as opposed to what are we saying with this extreme violence. And apparently, in terms of the production, the actress, I'm reading from a quote here, the actress Frank Stoppi recalled Joe D'Amato saying on set that we're, quote, making a movie to make people throw up, where we must make them vomit. And, so if that's your modus operandi, then I suppose in a way that they succeeded because, the part that I found rather gross was sucking the guts out through the nose, through the tubing in the nose, and like eating her heart and stuff like that. And it was just like, I don't know. It
one of the better scenes in the movie, but we'll get into the specifics.
Well, gore hounds will probably like that sort of thing. But nothing against that. It's just I tend to like. I think violence is such a. If you do it right, violence can be the most impactful thing that you can put on film, but it's a tricky balance.
That's fair. Jake, did you actually watch this one?
I did, and
Oh,
I was thinking that I was going to be the first dissenting voice, but Dane beat me to it. This is most definitely a first watch and probably a last. And I will be honest, I specifically did not watch certain scenes. So
okay.
for the exact reason that Dane just articulated, I don't mind.
I warned him.
But I don't do gore. And I agree the idea that if you really, I appreciate the art that can go into it, but just to make someone vomit, to me, that has never to me been the most artistic of reasons. Let's put it that way, for making a film. And it's not a sensation I enjoy. I prefer to avoid it. So I don't mind being creeped out or shocked or what have you, but I don't want to feel like I have to throw up. So as far as the rest of the film, I was shocked at how much of the film I was able to sit and watch. I was led to believe that it was going to be gore start to finish. There actually was maybe 10 minutes in the whole film, maybe. So most
The
of
really disgusting stuff, yeah.
Most of it was actually watchable, passably entertaining, but it's definitely not one I would rate highly or have much desire to see again.
The only thing I really had a problem with was the thing where they're eating and it's just a close up of that lady's mouth dripping with gunk. That
everybody hates that scene. Yes.
That was the one moment where I was like, what the hell is this? Although then again, perfect. I was somewhat distracted by when you get inspiration for a project, you just kind of run with it, and so I was actually carving a human face. So
hey,
what was going on in the TV felt a little bit less disturbing than what was actually going on in my apartment.
How about you, Brandon? Oh, let's ask Brandon if this was a first time watch for him.
Of course, I fielded it first so that I could warn Jacob about the gory parts.
Sure.
I actually watched it nearly immediately. I have not seen this before, and I actually also go with the consensus a lot of ways is sometimes the violence did feel like it was violence for violence sake, which I don't care as much for in a film, though I was also surprised because when I originally was talking about this with y'all, we were talking about the gore level, but to me, the gore level was very tame as compared to a lot of other movies like, what was the one, Street Trash is a good example. I mean, it's not over the top, it's more realistic gore.
Right.
But I was more from... I actually... This was not my first film by this director, and I have an amusing anecdote story about it that I will say later on, because it doesn't really fit about the first watch. But when I looked up the director, I came up with that, so that's going to be fun. But otherwise, I listened to it, and I had a couple of notes that I've jotted down for later on, but otherwise, first impression, I didn't dislike it. I thought it was interesting. There were definite flaws in it, and I felt like a lot of the violence didn't need to be as tuned up as it was. But otherwise, it was watchable. I'd probably be willing to watch it again, but probably self-edit the violent scenes to the point where I'm not watching them when they're going on.
Okay, that's fair. And I know, David, this was not a first-time watch for you because you actually sent me a copy of the movie.
Yeah. I actually, I'm a fan of the Italian Paolo films, and I had a copy, but I also, when 88 Films went and found the 16 millimeter transfer they were going around on Indiegogo and letting you be able to have like your name in the background and some really cool copies of 5 films that they were transferring from the negatives. This happened to be one of the films that was being transferred, and I was able to have my name on with David Lynch in there somewhere. So evidently he was one of the contributors to the film, and I was excited to see this film again because I actually like films that are violent for violence sake for some reason. And even though I know that there's a lot of people who can turn their heads at this kind of gore, I've been kind of desensitized to most of it, so I can just kind of graze through these types of films. The thing that the thing that I kind of somewhat turned my head at when I first saw this was the dismemberment of that body, and when you put it into the acid tub, you actually saw the dismemberment, and I don't think that was something that was necessarily seen as much in full detail. And and I actually thought to myself, well, some of the actresses that were used in Italian films at the time, some of them were, shall I say skinny minis?
Involved in hardcore content.
Well, I actually thought the second girl that was in that he picked up, she was a little bit more thicker on top, which is
the hitchhiker. She was my favorite character in the whole movie. I have to say, if somebody ever remakes this, I would love to play the hitchhiker girl in the remake. So I'm putting that out there right now. I would happily play that. She's the best role in the whole movie, in my opinion.
So,
anyway, that's a great segue into our plot, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
So I have a few notes here about it. I'm wondering, did anybody pick up on the Psycho references with this one at all?
There were a handful of them, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, taxidermists, that's the tip off right away.
Even the relationship, yeah.
Yeah, and the whole like Oedipus complex thing with Iris and kind of like mommy issues going on there.
Mother like figure and kind of was lactose intolerant, wasn't he?
That was when I first watched this movie, and I was like, okay, so already we have fingernails being pulled off and like breastfeeding. Like, I'm so in on this 100%. I love all that like really creepy oddball shit, and the Iris's character, if any.
Well, the reason I think behind the fact that that he ripped her nails off is because she scratched him. So I think it was a point that since you took and scratched me, I'm going to take the things, your claws away from you.
Well, and I have an interesting thought that I didn't pick it up the first time I watched it, but on the rewatch in preparation for this show, the whole voodoo scene happens where clearly Iris has intentions with this voodoo, where she goes and gets this voodoo stuff done so that she can kill Anna, so that she can have Frank to herself, whatever. I'm wondering if anybody picked up on, what's up with Frank? Like, why is Frank suddenly like psycho? Does it have something to do with this voodoo? Like, is he somehow influenced by this voodoo, or is this just a result of his fiance's untimely death that just sends him into, being a psycho killer?
And then he becomes so obsessed with Anna after she's dead,
Right. It's like something switched in him. He didn't seem like he was such a psycho before, but I'm wondering if anybody has any theories on that, if it was part of this voodoo or not.
Yeah, I just thought he was always somewhat of a dick. I mean, he came across as that type of guy, and the movie kept it made like he's the guy who can have any girl at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And he had found the one girl that he liked and just went over the edge. But he seemed like the kind of guy who solved most of his problems with violence. He just got more and more violent with the severity of the situation. So to me, it was just an amplification as to what he was already.
Well, evidently, Iris is supposed to be like his mother, right?
She's the housekeeper, like knows him from childhood or whatever. So she's been around for a while.
But there was that
Parents
part where
are
they
dead.
were like at that dinner party and they were like announced that they were going to get married, right? Or
Well, that was if you recall, she's encouraging him to get rid of Anna. She's dead. We can't do anything with her. Get rid of her. And he says, no, I'm not getting rid of her. You can have, like he agrees to marry her. He says something about you can be the matriarch of the house or something like that. But I need.
But he
to
clearly
have
didn't want to.
Anna.
You could tell he ran off and.
Yeah, he just said whatever he had to say to her to get her to let him keep her, Anna, in the house. And then so she takes that and runs with it. And I'm getting married and I'm going to have this dinner party and tell all my old ass weird friends about it. And yeah, and as soon as he's confronted, like, meet the people and let's tell them our big news, he's like, hell no.
I get
marrying your crazy ass.
got the feeling that I mean, you know what they always say about, once you've had your first lover in your life, your first is always the one that you remember. I think
they're taking that to the extreme in this case, I think.
Into the afterlife, so to speak.
Well, and I also think the fact that he's a taxidermist, like, that sort of adds that creepy factor. Because, I mean, you got to be a little weird, probably, to be able to do that as a hobby. But I thought it was a clever angle because it makes it more believable that he's able to suck her brains out through her nose and, engage in these behaviors.
He put those, like, glass eyes in her.
Right, yeah, it's all creepy stuff to us, but to him, it's what he's
Just
used
normal.
to doing. Yeah.
But he definitely had serious attachment issues, that's for sure. And he also obviously had some other issues going on too. I mean, like that one girl that hurt her ankle and he brings her back. And it's like there was no reason at all whatsoever she would have ever had to know about Anna. But he must have had
But he gets off on that, man.
Those dead glass eyes just turned him on. So while they were getting it on, it was just exciting to have that necrophiliac moment, right there.
Right, those undertones are of necrophilia, cannibalism, all of that kind of.
Well, the thing that I wondered is why he had to go cover her up before he went, to get the gauze. Why he was paranoid, to go cover her up, and then.
It seems to me like it's a fetish behavior for him almost. Like he had to go in there, check on her, and
yeah.
I imagine that he gets some excitement from looking at this dead body, and then he goes to interact with this other woman, and it's like he's trying to connect, he's trying to bridge that. He's doing these physical acts with this woman who's alive, but he's really thinking about his dead wife, or dead fiance.
Or like sometimes those kinds of things like work weird too. Like every once in a while, like when I get out of the shower and I'm standing near like one of my pet tanks, like if I see the lizard looking at me, I'm gonna put something like over the tank so the lizard's not looking at me. Like you can feel like self-conscious about weird things like that sometimes, and that's kind of what I got out of that. It's like, oh, I've got this other girl here. Oh, my fiance is still alive in my mind. Make sure she's not watching.
But then he uncovers her so that he can look at her.
You see, to me, it's predatory behavior. He covered her up, in my opinion, so that because he knew if she was uncovered when he took the girl into the room to kill her, because I don't think that he intended on doing anything more than killing her. I believe that he knew that she would run as soon as she saw that. So his hope was to get her in there, and then he could uncover her after the woman is in there and she is trapped. To me, he's a classic Predator type character. Again, I don't consider him a good guy in any means, shape, or form.
No, I would say that's pretty accurate.
Mhm.
Did anybody else have any thoughts on the plot before we move on to characters?
Did anyone else feel like there were a lot of scenes that really dragged? Which, I mean, part of that I admit is Italian cinema tends to be a little bit more meandering and slower paced, especially in that era. So I can kind of chalk it up to that, at least partially. But even with that being said, it felt like there were a lot of scenes that just dragged or just took forever to get going. Which again, that's a very American thing to say, and I'm used to things moving at a slower pace, but it's just there has to be a little bit more to it to justify a slower pace. In other words, like if you're lengthening things, and it probably means that you don't have, a whole lot of story there to begin with. If that
Well,
makes
what
sense.
I got out of some of those lengthy scenes was there wasn't a whole lot of dialogue, and I think that's what made them feel lengthy. And I think at least my interpretation of that was the intent was to create some sort of mood or feeling, or like I noticed a lot of scenes with Frank where he's just making a lot of facial expressions or he's just doing things, but he's not saying a whole lot. I think probably this scene with the girl hitchhiker was probably the most dialogue in the movie, like up to that point. There was just a lot of we see Frank doing and having very few words. So I think some of those scenes, like especially in the beginning where Anna's still alive in the hospital, there's a lot of exchange of facial expressions between people, and maybe that is just a stylistic choice. And I feel like that's kind of Italian cinema in general, but
Mhm.
I picked up on a lot of mood stuff with those slow scenes, like where he's sitting in the bedroom and he's looking at the picture of his mom, and then he's like looking at himself in the mirror, and it's kind of hokey by today's standards. Probably not anything that would translate very well today, but I kind of picked up on the mood they were trying to create there.
Which, and I'm just to clarify, I am the big silent movie guy, and I tend to like big, stretches of film without dialogue, assuming that the visuals are keeping your interest, and that like here's a good example, like for a good, I want to say at least 10 minutes of the very opening of There Will Be Blood, there's not a single line of dialogue, and it keeps your interest the entire time because the pacing is slow and deliberate, but with plenty of things happening, and also, Daniel Day Lewis is able to communicate a whole lot without having to say anything. Of course, and then when he does, he has a lot to say. But it's just it takes a lot to make something without dialogue interesting, and the silent masters knew that, and certain gifted people know that today, if they're daring enough to do that. Um, I think it's really a matter of just making every single frame count, every sequence count, nothing extraneous, nothing overly long, or a lot of it's in the editing and the pacing, I think, and just making sure you have enough story to justify what you're showing us.
I think I know what you're saying, Dame, because there was a recent film that I was watching with my fiance last night before I switched it because it was so slow, and I'll go back to it later, but it was a film called A Ghost Story from 2000.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was
Like everybody else is like, oh yeah, fuck that movie. Yeah.
There's at least 20 minutes of her sitting eating a bowl and she's doing nothing, and he's standing. Casey Affleck is standing there in a sheet with two holes. Look, and that's all that's being done. She's just spooning her food into her mouth, and there's no emotion, no nothing, no action. just total blah.
Yeah. Well, it
was one that
what was the one that I saw? Like I was watching the original Carrie the other night, and there are a lot of sequences that are slow and in slow motion without dialogue, but there's also a lot going on visually. And people would complain that, that part of the reason why there's a lot of slow mo there is to pad out what's otherwise a short story. But again, there's a lot of different layers of movement within the shots that are slow motion. There's more going on, and also the fact that they're aided by a story which has plenty of dramatic tension and all these other elements to carry what could otherwise be something tedious. So again, it's just you gotta make sure you've got something else carrying the weight of the movie in order to justify a slower pace.
That's fair, and I'm probably easily entertained, which is also fair. So let's move on to the
nothing
characters.
nothing against if that's the case, because it's perfectly acceptable to enjoy something that just entertains you, or you may find, or someone else may find junky, but you're like, well, I liked it. It's perfectly okay to do that.
Well, and that's why we all talk about it, because we all got something, something out of it different. So moving on to our characters, we talked a lot about Frank, I think. I think we could probably elaborate a little bit more on Iris. I feel like she's maybe the bigger villain in our story. Does anybody have anything to share on Iris that we haven't already talked about?
That was the maid / old lady, right?
Yes.
Yeah, she seemed to be kind of driving / incentivizing, like,
Absolutely.
the mayhem.
I agree. She seemed to be almost like that's why I wondered, with this whole voodoo spell, I kind of thought maybe there was more to it. Maybe she put some kind of a spell on him, because it almost seemed like she was sort of steering the ship there, making the decisions, or at least motivating him to make certain decisions.
Well,
I think she would. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if she had tried, she obviously wanted him, whether for the villa or for him or for whatever. And she obviously thought getting rid of Anna was how to go about it. That clearly blew up in her face. So if she had put a spell on him, she obviously, it may have been an example of being careful what you wish for, like she didn't do it right. Because if she did, I don't think the effects ended up being what she expected or wanted.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, because she definitely seemed to be paddling uphill with him every time she had him do something that seemed to backfire.
He did go and grab Anna's corpse back from the graveyard, bring it back, and when he did bring it back, it was in Iris's presence. He did give her the option to leave because he's got his precious Anna there,
Well, and it was her who originally helps him get rid of the body, or not get rid of it, but deal with it. She steps in, and with the hitchhiker, she helps him deal with all of that. So she's definitely has like a protective influence over him, where she, he could have, who knows? He managed to escape the cops, who might have stopped him while he was changing his flat tire. Like, what an inconvenient flat tire that was. But, he seemed to get past the cops okay in that situation. But, who knows where he'd be without Iris's careful planning. Did anybody else have thoughts on any of the other minor characters at all before we move on?
The only thing
Brandon, were you going to say something? Go ahead.
I was going to say, the only thing I had thought about the many of the other minor characters, it always struck me as odd how charismatic this person apparently is. I mean, especially with the jogger. I mean, there are two things that bothered me. I felt like a lot of the times the women who weren't the main characters were just put in there to show some gore and death.
Yeah, probably.
They didn't kind
Like,
of appear randomly.
I mean, the jogger comes in there, he fixes her foot, and again, maybe this is a European thing. I'm not an expert on this, but it just seems rather odd that it goes directly from "I just met you, creepy guy" to "All right, let's go."
Well, and I think he's designed as a character to be, really like a pretty boy. I mean, he's no Joe Spinell in Maniac, but he's able to at least get these women to go home with him because he's a looker. I think that's kind of the idea that we're supposed to take. But I think also in the English overdubbing, I am sure that some of the nuance in his interaction is probably lost.
The hitchhiker only bothered me because she just suddenly appeared in his car.
Yeah, you're not going to pick me up. I'll just hop in.
Which, so I didn't feel sorry for the hitchhiker at all because, I'm sorry, but you just jump in a stranger's car. That's a bad decision.
I love her.
I actually was, if somebody had done that to me, I would be creeped the heck out by the hitchhiker. It's like, what do you
Well, she said she was traveling around, and that was the best way to see the country was to be a hitchhiker.
Right, it wasn't her first rodeo, that's for sure.
Traveling
and she had that
good
good stuff to share. He didn't partake in any, but...
Well, and you never know. She might have had something going on in the background. Who knows? She might have had her own trail of bodies left behind.
Let's do a spin-off. Somebody make a spin-off. I'll star in that too. I totally love that character.
A spin-off of the hitchhike person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Her backstory, her origin story.
Earlier that day.
Right.
You know what's actually kind of funny? As I was looking at her facially, she kind of reminded me of Catherine Martin, the main victim in Silence of the Lambs, a little bit.
I was thinking that.
Yeah,
well,
like Baby from Dirty Dancing, but like a fatter version.
Yeah, well,
what's her name?
They do
Jennifer Grey.
I forget her character's name, but yeah, they have a similar. Well, particularly her and Catherine Martin, they have similar faces, similar hair. They're they weigh
Chubby.
more than say Jennifer Grey does. But yeah, that did get me thinking about that, and obviously, this film came first. But thought that was kind of interesting, and they both get picked up by crazy men and get killed. Well, actually, no, Catherine Martin doesn't get killed, but picked up by crazy men and all that stuff. One scene that I will commend the film for, which I thought was actually pretty suspenseful, was when the dead woman's arm is poking through the window of the van.
Yeah.
It looks like it's going to brush the sleeping hitchhiker, and he has to tuck it back. Like, I thought that was actually a pretty good suspenseful scene. I could have imagined like a later period Hitchcock doing something like that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Definitely.
And I do have to say about the hitchhiker, I personally thought she had the best naked scene. I mean, it was a shame she was already dead, but her naked scene, like her getting chopped up, like her boobs are jiggling all over the place. I mean, what more would you want there? That was beautiful. That was perfect.
Was anyone else importantly know that the housekeeper was just tossing pieces into the acid bath?
Yeah, right? Like no splashback or anything. They were wearing aprons. It was all good.
I tend not to think about the anatomy of corpses too terribly much, but I think that she, perhaps you might say, had more personality in how she was dismembered, even though I will say that hoses in the up your nose with a rubber hose, quite literally.
Ooh.
Tales of entrails.
Yeah, I would say that kind of takes the cake in terms of personality.
Totally. Did anybody else want to say anything more about the characters before we move on? Because this is a perfect time to segue into the special effects.
I always got kind of confused as to who was who. But that's kind of a normal thing with any of like these older movies. Like they'll say the character's name once, like really quickly, like offhandedly, and then I'll never know. People will be referring to them by name, and I'll be like, "Wait, who?" And they'll be, "Oh, the guy with the hair." It's like, "Oh, okay."
Just load up the IMDb page while you're watching the movie and check back in on some of those important details.
The creepy pretty boy, the creepy housekeeper, the hitchhiker, the jogger, the guy who's constantly trespassing.
Oh yeah, we didn't even at all talk about the investigator guy, but I don't know that he adds a whole lot other than just.
Did he really even do anything? Like he sees a body, and then I don't remember what happened to him after that.
He figures some shit out. I mean, he was just. I think he was like the threat to like they're gonna get caught doing this shit.
Well, to further the Psycho connection, he's kind of the Arbogast of the movie.
Right.
I mean, that plot thread went nowhere, though. That was the sad thing.
Yeah.
I felt like it was kind of, other than a throwback to Psycho, it was kind of a pointless. It was.
Well, you have to have some challenge of some sort, I think, and I think that was the presented challenge. Because I mean, if it was just they are able to kill people with no recourse or no I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess
no threat.
Yeah, there's no threat there.
Which, what's funny, actually, on that same level, I kind of felt that way about Willem Dafoe's character in American Psycho. Like, when he first appears, it's Willem Dafoe, and you're like, oh, man, you got these two great actors together, and he's going to be like the Van Helsing to Patrick Bateman's Dracula. It's like they're going to be like a chess game with each other. And that doesn't really happen. He's just kind of there a little bit, and that's kind of it. Which is really too bad, because that's... I know. And that's... Now, granted, there's plenty of other sources of conflict in that story, and it's much more of a satirical piece than it is a conventional horror film in terms of, bad guy protagonist and law enforcement antagonist, all that stuff. There's other stuff going on to make it work, but I do remember feeling a little disappointed that this great actor, possibly my favorite living actor, was vastly underutilized in the story, when you wish that it could have evolved into this cat and mouse game between the two of them.
What are you talking about, American Psycho?
Yeah, and
well, the whole reason that was in there, right? It was to show that, I mean, people are noticing that the people he kills are disappearing, but
yeah, exactly.
It ties into the theme of like nobody really cares or can even tell each other people like apart from other people.
That's right.
Like
each time
Defoe appears, they told him to play it a different way each time. Like to play it in each different scene, he plays it as either he knows Bateman killed Jared Leto, whose name I totally fucking forgot. He doesn't know that Bateman killed Jared Leto, or he's unsure. Like, they had him change it, like, every time. So that entire relationship in American Psycho is just part of the plot of, like, anonymity and indifference. So that's, for that purpose, like, it's perfect. And it's also it's also to subvert, like, the expectations that people have for that. So it's kind of a good thing. I got a message saying he's disconnected. Where'd he go?
Sorry, I appear to have gotten disconnected for whatever reason.
I argued him right out of the call.
I guess so, but yeah, I got why he was there. But you see what I was trying to get at, like, you were
wrong.
a hope. You would like for there to be a sufficient antagonist who's a law enforcement to try and counter the bad guy main character, but that doesn't always happen. case in point.
Especially not Italian horror movies.
Yeah. Well, case in point, Arbogast in Psycho, Willem Dafoe in American Psycho, and then
my point
this
was you don't need it depending on the story you're trying to tell.
Yeah, it really depends. Not every there's not always the Dracula, Van Helsing, or Michael Myers and Dr. Loomis dynamic. That doesn't always have to be there.
What I wanted to say before we went on to the special effects is when I looked into the history of what titles of this film were released in other different countries, I found it interesting that in Italy in 1987 it was re-released as in Quella Casa Buio Omega as an attempt to pass it off as part of the Evil Dead American films, Evil Dead 1 and 2.
Yep.
In which were
that is
released
one
as
hell of a stretch. Wow.
It is. I actually have that in my notes at the end for additional items of note. I actually wrote that down in here.
In Spain, the film was marketed as being a sequel to the House series as House 6 El Terra Contigua. And in Mexico it was marketed as part of the Zombie series, which is part of Lucio Fulci franchise. So,
but you gotta love how
it is
you
widely
gotta love how a lot of Italian exploitation films just run rampant with becoming unofficial sequels or retitling themselves a million times to try and cash in on this thing and this thing.
Jaws 5, Cruel Jaws.
But like we
exactly.
a couple weeks ago with Django, how many unofficial quote sequels were there with that one?
It's like 20 to 30, something like that. It's ridiculous.
Oh, little piece of useless information related to Django. Franco Nero actually starred in The Third Eye, which apparently Buio Omega is a remake of The Third Eye. So, little piece of trivia for you there.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I had one point on the slowness, just real quick.
Oh, sure.
I just thought about it really, because I saw another film from a similar time period called Beyond the Door, which has a lot of odd credited sequels, but that one also had that pacing issue, non-issue, depending on what it was. I really do feel like that's also an aspect of the time. In the 70s, there was that idea of pacing, and then add on top of it, it's an Italian film. It's just an artistry to take your time. I mean, that's just in the culture in general.
I think that probably does hold true, both high and low quality. I've seen a fair bit of Italian films, and I know, Brandon, you have that Fellini rule that you've instituted. I'm sure some of that... but also Paolo Sorrentino, so a lot of them are very languid films. But when they're good, they're really good. They can be very entertaining despite the pacing. But they do tend to kind of meander a little, from what I've seen.
Well, all right. Are we ready for special effects now, guys?
Yeah.
Probably.
Ready to jump into that? Because, I mean, that's probably my favorite aspects of the film are the special effects. And not, like was mentioned before, not because it's like way over the top, but because it was so realistic looking.
How do you die from getting your nails pulled?
That's not how she died. If you were paying attention, he actually suffocated her with like some dirty pair of underwear or something like that.
Well, she appeared to like just kind of go limp after he finished, and I was like, oh, okay.
No, he then got on top of her and stuffed that cloth in her mouth and suffocated her.
Well, you know what's interesting? A little bit of medical trivia there. Actually, strangling a person takes much more force and takes longer than is shown in movies. Like in
I
movies,
believe
it
it.
takes a few seconds. In real life, it takes like I think at least 5 minutes, or something like that.
I wanted
In
to say
order,
13
something like that. But it's like
or
the point is, it takes
8.
quite a long
That was
time
it. 8.
because you have to cut off someone's air supply in a sustained fashion, and assuming that they're not also thrashing around and potentially loosening one's grip or whatever, and it takes several minutes for oxygen to like leave someone's brain long enough for them to die and things like that. So it's like,
Unless you put a bag over their head.
yeah, but even I mean that I'm sure probably helps, but it's like, the point is that it takes longer than movies typically show, as far as like traditional strangulation.
Well, and we may just have to suspend our belief in several. I think
Oh yeah,
several of the kills we have to
it's
do
like
that
how
in this movie.
it's like how cars in movies, one single bullet will make them blow up always.
Yes,
Even though
right.
in real life it's actually quite difficult for a car to blow up. Luckily,
It is. Yes.
That's what I like. That's one of the few things I really liked about Last Action Hero, when he's expecting the car to blow up, and then it's like, why isn't it blowing up? I shot it.
Exactly. So what do you guys think of the way the gore was shot in this movie? Well, for those of you who watched it, the
a
gore
lot of it
part.
was pretty convincing. Like most of the gore, it
I
was like,
thought-
eh.
And long shots. I mean, they stayed on it for a while.
Yeah, they did.
well, I
mean,
did
where you
like
see
that
cutting to the skin.
I did like the the sound effects that they used for this is gonna sound awful, but the sound effects that they used for like disemboweling and all that. But the one that actually did kind of crack me up a little bit was the the gut, the brains or whatever, the blood through the nose, the hose in the nose, when the blood and goop went into the receptacle. It honestly sounded like someone was on the toilet.
Totally.
It really did, but
With
then
the ship.
again, yeah, but then again, it's that same, it's kind of chunky fluid in a narrow space, so it's gonna
Well, and
probably
such
sound like that.
such
Yeah.
a visceral scene, and I mean, to imagine it, to really be putting yourself there. That's why the scene following with I'm sorry, the scene that follows the bathtub scene where they're eating the nasty or she's eating the nasty goulash or whatever. That scene is only as effective as it is because of the disgustingness before it.
Yeah,
That sort
very
of sets you up for it.
Yeah,
And I feel like they do that well in this one.
I was actually watching this movie with Jill for like the first 30 minutes, and she eventually got to the point where she was just too grossed out, and she has kind of a sensitive stomach anyway. So it's like, yeah, probably not a good idea to keep going with this one. But
yeah, it'll do that to you. That was the idea, right? Gotta
yeah,
make them vomit.
Apparently so. But yeah, I did like, for the sake of realism, I like I think they said cow intestines that were used.
Animal intestine, pig skin, and sheep's heart.
Yeah, well, it kind of reminded me of how in Eraserhead, which we watched, you had the cow fetus that was used as the baby. So it's like you can use real animal parts for effectiveness and make it work. And obviously, I'm sure, just go to a slaughterhouse and they can probably take care of it for you. In terms of acquiring that stuff, not exactly a specialty, item.
Well, and what I noticed and picked up on that I don't know that I've ever seen done in any other movies that I've seen is where you actually see him cutting out parts of her insides, where it's like there's separating of membranes and like cutting through things, and that must have been a section of a dead animal that where it's not all the separate parts, just like, oh, we got some intestines here and a liver here, we'll just throw it all in there. it actually looked like there was connective tissue and stuff. And to me, I thought that was awesome. Like, I don't think I've ever seen it like that.
Well,
I mean, truly gross.
It looked like he pulled the fat of her out too. Besides the liver and intestines, so it kind of looked real to me, just a little bit. Even though I was joking off to the side. Well, here's the Laffy Taffy version of intestines.
I mean, I'm never gutted a human being before, so I don't know what it really looks like, but I can imagine it was. I mean, it's got to be pretty close.
I've had to participate in autopsies before, so
most.
It depends on how like fresh the thing is. Like, I've done dissections on animals before for labs, and it's not like a ultra nasty bloody thing like a lot of people think it is. I mean, yeah, there's fluid, but it's a surprisingly closed system. It's kind of hard to describe.
I remember
it's cleaner than you
dissecting.
think.
Yeah. I actually, a little bit of trivia too here. I actually took a taxidermy class when I was in 7th grade. And so I'm familiar with some of the things that you do for taxidermy. And yeah, I've had to skin a squirrel before. So I think a lot of that stuff, you know, even if you have a little bit of knowledge about it, you know, a little bit, your brain sort of fills in the blanks for the rest of it.
Well, and apparently, first of all, humans and pigs biologically are not so different in terms of the fact that we're the only animals that sweat, and they have their own kind of skin, and
pig skin tissue is similar enough to humans. They use it in like accident testing and stuff like that.
And tattoo practice.
That's right, and also apparently,
crime.
I think with some people who have actually tasted human flesh, they say it does taste a bit like pork. Apparently.
Delicious.
That's why I put a lot of chorizo into my chili.
And I do like
prime meat.
I do like my pork. So.
It's in the meat. I've got an eye for quality meat.
Runs in the family.
Actually, watched
sorry, I'm already drunk.
The one that was sent, there was an interview with somebody in the film at the end. I don't know if anybody else sat there and listened to the whole thing. I had to turn off the visuals because it just kept replaying all the gory parts over and over again.
I mentioned that. Yeah, it went into that like interview, and it was actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that there was a rumor at the time that they were using real dead bodies in relation to that particular shoot thing. One of those like, well, this forbidden Easter egg, they actually used real dead bodies, which of course they didn't. But it's just the show that the stuff was that realistic looking that people actually could look at that and then believe that rumor. That's a testament to the special effects.
Definitely, I would agree.
There's a lot of movies that are like that, though, where people thought they used, they really killed people, and
yeah, they had to go to court for Cannibal Apocalypse or Holocaust.
Cannibal Holocaust,
yeah. I said I was drunk. I'm sorry.
Does anybody have anything else to add on the special effects before we move on?
No, they were pretty convincing for the most part. Like, most of the time with this Italian stuff from that era, you get kind of like a bit of like a goofy vibe to some of it. Like, some of it you can tell is kind of fake. Most of the stuff I saw in this was pretty convincing, so I'd say this had above average at best.
Too.
What?
Better blood than like, say, like not an Italian movie, but Dawn of the Dead. Like, the blood in Dawn of the Dead doesn't look nearly as good as the blood in this movie, and they're right around the same time period that they both came out. So I was impressed with the effects all around for the time period, especially.
Dawn of the Dead is its own kind of like unique thing, though. Like, I feel like some of the effects in Dawn of the Dead, like not being being like their own kind of like style of things. I feel like that was intentional. It's like the blood being like somewhat surreal.
Tom Savini.
I don't know. It was it's probably I have the really expensive Blu-ray version of it that came out a few years ago, and I also have that ultimate collector like 4-disc DVD thing that I haven't watched yet. So it's probably somewhere in there because a lot of the
we've got
effects
the Japanese one that I think has a bunch of extras on it. So I have to look into that.
There's a lot of stuff available for that movie. Like it's like Halloween. Like the people that are into it are really, really into it to the point where it's like, ew, what's going on? So I'm sure somebody knows the answer.
Well, we'll have to make that our homework. Speaking of Dawn of the Dead, which was scored by Goblin, this film was also a Goblin score, which I personally loved, and actually started listening to the score before I watched the movie because I had the ability to listen to the music first, and I fell in love with the music right away. So I'm curious to hear what you all thought about it.
The music's fucking great. Like,
yeah, I love the music.
There's really there's not a whole lot more to it. I mean, it's like the standard. It's like the standard of quality that Goblin is known for. I mean, it sounds a lot like all the other stuff that they did. Like, you can tell that it's Goblin. Like, it's not quite stuck in my head yet, but I can kind of hear it.
Oh my god, it's stuck in my head all the time. But I've literally been listening to the entire soundtrack on a loop for like a month straight. It's kind of, I'm a little obsessed. It's kind of weird.
Well, I have the main theme for Tenebrae like stuck in my head most of the time.
Yeah, same. Well, the Profondo Rosso theme is my alarm that I wake up to in the morning. So it sort of is always, there's always some Goblin ringing in my ears.
There's goblins all over the place. I think there are even a couple of like random LPs out at Exclusive Company right now.
Ooh, tempting.
Yeah,
I've got
always tempting.
I have a horror playlist on Spotify that is very heavy with Goblin and, Claudio Simonetti and all of it. John Carpenter thrown in there too. I like all that crazy weird shit.
Which I did like the music because I like Goblin, but I've liked other scores of theirs more, namely Suspiria, but it still was probably the best part of the movie.
I can
disagree. Oh, you have to see it. Well, and they're remaking it, so definitely see it before the remake comes out.
Oh, so the Suspiria remake?
Yeah.
They got into some trouble because a few of the shots were based on like something about like feminist art paintings or whatever, and they got in like trouble. Like they might have to remove some scenes from it.
Really?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Feminist art paintings?
Like some of the art it's like a bloody outline like on a wall was one of them, or it's another one where it's like some girl like lying on a table like as if she's being like tied down and like assaulted. I read it and it didn't really make sense. It was weird.
Yeah, I'm a little trying to follow that logic because, well, number one
they showed a picture of the shot from Suspiria, and then they showed a picture of like the art piece, and it was like, okay, that's really, really similar.
Well, it's just more the so you're, in other words, it was confirmed that it was a feminist art piece specifically.
It's art piece. They were like art pieces with a specific message.
Okay.
And they were like a visual inspiration for a lot of the themes of the movie, which made sense. I wish I remembered more details.
Yeah.
Like we're talking like real like good feminism, not like insane internet feminism.
I'm trying to just follow the whole thing because it sounds a little vague right now, but I'm sure
my memory of it is frankly pretty. Memory of it is frankly pretty vague.
Well,
honestly,
let's report back next week.
Okay. Well, what's coming to mind at the present moment is like the cat lady in A Clockwork Orange. That's where my brain's going with it, but that may not be, what it actually is.
Don't even remember what you're talking about.
Well, you've seen that movie, right?
Yeah, you mean the lady that gets like clubbed to death with the dick?
Yes, the
Okay.
paintings that are on her wall. I mean, that's more what came to my mind. But
from the article I read, that sounds relatively close enough-ish. I don't know. Like, on the other hand, all the early reviews for Suspiria said it was unbelievably great. So, see it. Just see it. See both of them.
I'm interested. Yeah. Well, definitely see the first one, first. That's a must-see, in my opinion.
Yeah. Like, especially if you can somehow get your hands on, like, the Synapse release from earlier this year, which is glorious. And
I need to get it in my collection. I mean, it is a classic. I know that much. So it's on my radar.
Buy the Synapse one. They did a reissue where it's like a normal case. It's got really nice art. It's not as nice as the Steelbook, but it's still pretty nice. The Steelbook is worth like $100 or something insane now. I kind of wish I'd bought two.
I think this is the Synapse art, the Joel Robinson art.
Is that the one where it's like a stained glass window? Because that's the Steelbook
No, that's
art.
the Steelbook art. I'm talking about just the regular Synapse Blu-ray.
It looks kind of like a Shout Factory cover where it's like the main girl and just like a bunch of like the imagery
like a
around.
knife in her hand.
Yeah, that's the one I.
Yeah,
that's the one
Joel
I see.
Robinson. Yeah, I have his print on my bedroom wall for that because
really
we ended
nice
up with
print.
the Steelbook. It is, and he's a very talented artist. I love all his work. Anyways, his Chainsaw Massacre 2 print is amazing. I have it on a T-shirt, and then I had Bill Moseley and Caroline Williams and Bill Johnson sign it.
What is that particular art print?
It's got it's got all the characters sort of in a collage on the front, and then I think it says Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 in orange, I want to say, like right up top. If you go to Joel Robinson's website or Facebook page, I'm pretty sure he's got pictures
Is that the one
on there.
Is that the one on the Arrow release?
Maybe. I can't remember which ones are on what.
It's like tan and red, and it's just like there's a stripe with all the characters drawn in it with the name of the movie.
It's more like a collage. It's more a colorful collage. Look up his page and you'll see it. He still has T-shirts available. That one. Ryan actually has the T-shirt version of that.
Now, back to the music on the essence.
Yeah, sorry everybody. This
tangent.
This tangent brought to you by Sierra Nevada Narwhal Imperial Stout. Pretty good. Go buy it.
To me, I was looking forward to the music itself a lot because it had been spoken up so much. But I think I had gotten the wrong idea in my head as to what I was hearing. Gonna hear when I listen to it. So I'm probably gonna have to listen to it again because I had a hard time distinguishing it from a lot of other horror films at the time. That just slight accentuation of what's going on. So I feel like I need to listen to it more just to be able to get what y'all are seeing in it.
I would encourage you to listen to the soundtrack without the movie. You can find it on YouTube pretty easily. If you just type in Buio Omega, it'll come up. Listen to the soundtrack and just sort of feel the music because I think even with the slight sound effects in the movie, it tends to drown out some of it. Like I've listened obviously in great detail with earbuds in and stereo sound, and you pick up so much more. I mean, their music is so multi-layered, and I think a lot of that is lost just listening to it in the film. So I would encourage to just check out the soundtrack on its own.
Okay.
Anybody else want to talk about anything with the music before we move on to our favorite stuff?
Not that I know.
Nope. All right. So, as far as favorites, it's really hard for me to pick a favorite scene. Or I already mentioned that the hitchhiker was my favorite character. But in terms of scenes, it's super tough. Like the fingernail pulling scene, the embalming scene, the bathtub scene. Something we hadn't talked about is when they put the runner into the oven, and how as she's burning up, her body's sort of like twisting and contorting and stuff. And I thought that was really gross and also awesome. So I definitely like that. What did you all like? What was your favorite stuff?
Mine was the bathtub, where they're just kind of like nonchalantly just like tossing parts into the tub. That may have been colored by for my other podcast, Pop Culture Weekly. We did an interview with Hart Fisher, who was, I guess, famous for some Jeffrey Dahmer comic, and so I did a lot of reading up on Jeffrey Dahmer, and maybe that was why it was kind of the most interesting part of the movie to me, because that was sort of like stuff that actually happened like around here.
Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah. Well, he did do that kind of stuff. He although with him, he ate the bodies or preserved parts of them in the fridge, and his neighbors remarked how he never
smelled.
bought groceries, and yet the smell was rancid from his apartment, and it smelled like chitlins, apparently, which is pig intestines again.
Well, I didn't know that part.
Oh yeah, keeping up with the the pig theme again. But yeah, apparently. So yeah, there's definitely real life precedents for such things, unfortunately.
Side note to Jeffrey Dahmer stuff, I think as a Milwaukee-based podcast, we ought to do some Jeffrey Dahmer film at some point that we can talk about, because I think we could probably those of us who grew up here in Milwaukee probably have some interesting anecdotal stories about Jeffrey Dahmer and what was going on in our life at the time. So I don't know, we'll mark that in the notes section for a future episode.
Well, I mean, I personally don't want to necessarily see anything that like glorifies him, because it's kind of weird how I feel about it, because I mean, I like this stuff a lot when it's like fiction, but when it starts to cross into reality, like it just feels
that's
you know what I mean?
But that's why I'm kind of I like fictional work, obviously, but I love studying serial killers, because the only way to know about the true dark aspects of human nature is to learn about those that exercise them on a regular basis, because I firmly believe all of us have the capacity to do tremendous good or tremendous evil depending on our circumstances of birth and our and our own choices. So it's really important to be able to study the behavior of those who give in to their darkest urges, or who have particularly abnormal fixations, so that if for no other reason, that we can better purge ourselves of any darkness in our own souls, and hopefully be able to recognize any kind of signs in children and be able to get them help early. And that's one thing that serial killer documentaries never ever talk about, and that's really sad, because I would hope that a lot of this stuff, if we're educated enough about it, people can catch warning signs and hopefully get children treatment early. I would hope so.
That sounded very highfalutin, I think is the best term I know for that.
What's that? What'd you say? Highfalutin?
Academic for the sake of academic.
Oh, okay.
I actually look at it in the middle. Like, I would not want to watch a serial killer film that glorifies the serial killer, obviously. I do agree with that. That's just way too much. But at the same time, I do find it fascinating to look at stories about them. that are willing to show them for who they are. If they are truly monsters and they are shown as what they are, then I have no issue with watching the film, because it actually does give you an accurate picture as to what's going on. Some of them are scarier than anything else because they are real, and that that could happen anywhere.
We'll have to do some research on. I know there's a few Dahmer films out there. I've not seen any of them, aside from maybe one documentary that I stumbled across on like Netflix or Amazon. But we'll have to look into it and see what would be a worthwhile watch for us that obviously isn't glorifying, but is maybe just educational. If nothing else.
There's a
Perhaps I
couple
misspoke.
there's a couple of them actually. There's the one that came out recently, My Friend Dahmer, which I
do want to see that.
I wanted to see that one, and then there was another one called Dahmer, which
Jeffrey
had
Dahmer.
well, there was one that was called Dahmer, and it had a young Jeremy Renner in it, and that's why Catherine Bigelow cast him in The Hurt Locker, because she'd seen him in that film. And so there's plenty of fiction ones. There's also plenty of documentaries. There's one in particular that I remembered watching that I really liked. It's just a good educational piece. There's a lot of good documentaries out there if you know where to look. But again, I highly emphasize education above all when it comes to this kind of stuff, because I'm not trying to be academic or overly academic or whatever you want to say, like bombastic or whatever I'm trying to say, pedantic is the word I'm looking for. I'm really sincere when I say, the more that we can look at early warning signs of psychopathy, sociopathy, things like that, then hopefully the more that people can get the treatment they need.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, whatever helps weirdos get help, right?
Yeah, I mean, the more that people get the help they need, the better.
Perhaps weirdos was the incorrect term.
I've worked with I've worked with individuals in the past who have definitely killed people, so I understand that. It's
well, and you know how obviously the problems that they faced early in their life are very numerous and debilitating, such that when they've gone that far down the rabbit hole, it's very, very hard to get back.
Oh yeah, it's rare to ever see somebody that you look at and they say they're born evil or
yeah.
It's not like your Michael Myers situation where, of course, unless you're talking Rob Zombie's one, which they make that argument that actually no, Rob Zombie's tried to humanize. The original one basically was he's born evil.
Yeah, he's more like a force of nature rather than a person, which I tend to be of the belief that monsters are made, not born. Unless you're talking about like some kind of genetic mental illness, which isn't necessarily the same thing. But and interestingly enough, as far as psychopathy versus sociopathy, sociopaths are made, whereas psychopaths are born. But not all psychopaths are murderous. There are plenty of them that are just, they lack empathy or whatever, but they don't kill. So that's a very different. It's a different. It's a very different thing than being a killer. And there are plenty of people who have killed who don't match that profile either. So.
Actually, I had a question, Jacob, for you, because out of all of us, I was before I came in there, I was more skeptical about you being able to get through this movie than anyone until I saw it, and I thought we could get through this. But did you have a favorite scene? I know for me, it was really hard to find one in general because I don't like the gory scenes, so it's hard for me to point to any of those.
There were a few particular scenes that I would say I really liked. I did find some gallows humor in them just throwing the pieces into the acid. And there were a couple other things. But probably the main thing that appealed to me, if anything, was I was actually thinking about bringing this as a way to bring back the conversation to the point at hand. But the idea of the main character as a topic of how mental issues could be a product of, as Dane was saying, kind of they weren't born. He wasn't born that way. I mean, you look at it like his parents died when he was young. He's been raised by this controlling woman who has a very unhealthy interest in him. He is aloof, partly because he's rich and partly because he got into taxidermy, which probably didn't give him a whole lot of friends. He's got all these things piling up bit by bit by bit. And yeah, maybe there was a little bit of a voodoo spell thrown in or something. He may have had a disposition towards being a twisted individual, but there was a lot there to push him towards that edge. And I did think the movie had a few interesting things to say about mental depravity. It's just, I didn't really have any one character to latch on to as someone I wanted to root for. And that, when you got someone to root for, that helps a lot. And, especially, we've had some other stuff cited through the course of this discussion. Like Dan earlier was talking about There Will Be Blood. I've made the point a couple of times that P.T. Anderson seems obsessed with mental depravity. Most of his characters suffer from it in some shape or form. And those movies often try my patience because it's hard to find one to latch onto. So that, for me, can be a big thing of having a character to root for, even if they are depraved. If they've got like something that you like, this guy just not quite.
Which,
almost.
it is funny that you say that, though, because I would make the argument that there are a lot of great movies out there that don't necessarily have a character to root for in the traditional sense of that term. It's more so like a good person who summed it up really well was John Travolta in his Inside the Actor Studio appearance, where he said, "I don't think that you have to like a character always; you just have to enjoy watching him." That there are certain characters that he reads the script, he's like, "Oh, I hate this character, but I enjoy watching him." Don't like what he does, but I enjoy watching him. And I think that's really what it comes down to: is this character engaging? Is what am I learning from this about humanity or about myself or about others through this character's actions? And I think the best films tend to be the ones where your sympathies change over time, that they tend to flip-flop back and forth based on a character's actions or inactions. And that's kind of what I tend to watch films for. I don't necessarily need a character to root for in that kind of traditional sense. It's just more about how characters interact with each other and how a master storyteller can make your your sympathies flip constantly throughout the story.
I actually did have a favorite scene myself, which was at the end, where
oh, I forgot about that. That was awesome.
Where they
where she pops up out of the coffin and she's alive.
Yeah, just that scene where it's almost got a ghostly, otherworldly element to it. Which, I'm more about supernatural horror than I am about gory horror. So I thought that in itself was haunting, even though, but also the fact that it was that there was sort of a warning of get out, leave this place before you become another victim.
That was
it's just
That's
To
an
me,
interesting scene in general, and I was wondering. It didn't come up when we were talking about the plot, but I wondered if you guys picked up on it, because I had listened to some other people discussing the film, and they missed what I thought was kind of obvious. That when the sister is waiting to see Frank, and she's in the room, the lights go out, and it's, oh, Elena, don't come here, it was a mistake to come here. I thought that's Iris doing that. She's trying to scare her and freak her out, and so that's why she put Anna's body in the chair, so that when Iris would come out, or when Elena would come out and see that, she would be freaked out and Iris could kill her. That was my take on that. And some people had thought like that it was really a ghost, and it's like, oh, this doesn't make sense. Why would there be a ghost all of a sudden? It's like, well, wasn't that Iris doing that? Did everybody else catch that?
well, I thought it was Iris doing it, but still had a
I
more
thought
of
it
a
was like I thought it was like a voodoo, she's still alive kind of thing. Like, it seemed to go into more supernatural territory because the voodoo thing at the beginning is very quick, and you kind of forget that there is a supernatural element involved in the plot for most of the film up until that end, and then it's like, oh yeah, so wait, what the hell was really going on? Like, was he just imagining, that he was taking care of her and she was alive, or was she still somehow alive, like, due to the voodoo?
That was
Like,
her
it was
sister.
bizarre as
That
fuck.
was Elena.
That was her sister?
Yes, because
Oh my god,
Anna
I'm
got
terrible.
thrown in the oven. So that who popped out of the coffin was Elena, the sister. They just thought it was Anna and that she was dead, or they thought it was Elena and she was dead. Either way,
Wait,
they
what?
assumed she was dead.
Yeah.
So
See,
that was
somebody else-
that was
Follow along
Elena?
closely. Yes, popping out of the coffin. Yes, it was.
See, somebody else was confused too.
Because they kind of
Italian
did the whole
movies.
bait and switch, right? Because when Elena comes to the house, now it's the same actress that plays both parts. So, of course, they're twin sisters or whatever. So Elena comes to the house to see Frank because her school term is over. She's going to go back, but she wanted to say goodbye to him. Iris puts her in a room. Okay, he'll be right there. While she's in the room by herself, the lights go out, and Elena, the ghost comes and tells her she should get out, which is really Iris doing that, trying to freak her out. So then Elena decides to try to leave, and all the lights are out, and she's trying to go out. And I think it's like the front entryway or something.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Frank's not there because he took the chick from the disco home or whatever, because she was taking a bath, and he's like, you got to get out now. I'll even take you home, but you got to leave now. So he takes her away. So Frank is gone, and it's just Iris and Elena in the house. And Iris sets up Anna's dead body in a chair. And when Iris comes out of the room, she sees that, she freaks out, and Iris tries to kill her. And right then Frank comes in, and there's, a scuffle, and she stabs him in the dick, and all hell breaks loose. And that's kind of the part where then you see the next thing you see him, he's at the oven, and he has, put somebody in there, and it's a little bit unclear if it's Anna or Elena. But then we realized that it was Anna because Elena pops out of the coffin at the end. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Mhm.
This was not a great movie to drink to.
It was meant to confuse you, though, because that was the jump scare at the end. That was the whole... I mean, I saw it coming a mile away, but I still enjoyed it. But yeah, if you didn't realize that was Elena in the coffin, and then she comes popping up, you would have never expected that to happen.
It's like at the end, it teases, it just like gets you.
Yeah, it was meant to surprise for sure. And I really liked that as well, even though I did see it coming from a mile away.
Does anyone think that Frank actually took that girl home?
What?
Do you think Frank actually took that girl home?
Oh, or just like dropped her off somewhere? Yeah, good question. Because he wasn't gone for too terribly long,
Yeah.
so she must not have lived too far away. He probably just dumped her off somewhere. Good point. Does anybody else have any other favorite stuff they want to talk about that we didn't cover?
Aside from like that bizarre ass bathtub scene, there's not a whole lot that stands out like really explicitly in my mind.
If you go on and look at the T-shirts and stuff that I can't remember the company name now that has that whole package. If it's Severin, I think it's Severin has a package where they're selling like a T-shirt and everything. That scene with the skull popping up in the bath is like the hallmark scene for the T-shirt. It's pretty gross. I love it.
Well, I would consider that part of the bathtub scene.
Right. That skull
the
popping
eyeball
up
floating around.
Yeah, that's that
like where
picture
they're just like
the T-shirt.
Where they're just calmly throwing stuff into the tub, and you're like, oh, okay, and then they just suddenly cut to like the dissolving head in the tub, and it's like, ah.
Well, you see Frank standing there, and he's kind of like, what did I just do? He's got this sort of exhausted look on his face, and he's leaning his head up against the wall, and he's got his arm up, and then you can tell something catches his attention, and he looks down, and everything's gurgling and farting and just being weird, and then the skull pops up. It's super gross, and there's like one eyeball stuck in it still. Awesome.
Exactly.
So gross. I love it. So if we move on to our additional items of note, we kind of already talked about the stuff that I took notes on, about all the different titles that this movie was released under or re-released under in the mid-'80s, so that it could possibly catch on with the popularity of the Evil Dead franchise. Let's see, I have that it was released in the U.S. as Buried Alive in 1985, re-released in Italy in 1987 as an attempt to pass it off as related to the Evil Dead franchise, and they called it In Quella Casa Buio Omega. And it was also marketed as House 6, which we talked about, and Zombie 10 in Mexico.
Zombie 10.
When I watched it said Beyond the Darkness.
Yeah, Beyond the Darkness is the American title, or Buried Alive.
Beyond the Darkness.
Or English title, I should say. Beyond the Darkness is the English translated title, and then the American title is Buried Alive, which only makes sense after you see the last scene of the movie. Yeah, but I don't really have, other than that it was banned in several countries, which I don't know if that's actually true, or they just said that to make it sound cool. Because I know some movies that weren't actually banned, they still would say that, because then people would want to watch them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true of a lot of this, especially like this older 70s era stuff. I mean, it's...
Actually, I had an odd and funny story related to this film, but I had to save it to alternate because it really didn't fit anywhere else. Of course, has anybody looked at the director's actual filmography?
Joe D'Amato? All I know about is Anthropophagus, which I'm pretty sure is the way you're supposed to pronounce it.
There's a lot of porn on his filmography, I know
yes. The very first film, The Sexy Canterbury Tales. I have a story regarding that, oddly enough.
Ooh, this is going to be good.
When I was young, my father had a specific cabinet that was locked for a particular reason.
A porn cupboard.
Exactly. And we had a break-in in the house. Back where I grew up, your relatives, they'd steal from you, they'd do whatever to you, but just so long as you didn't do it to non-related to family. It's family in the country can get messed up. So he broke into the house and stole one item. And the item that he stole was Sexy Canterbury Tales.
Okay.
Which drove almost an obsessive fascination with that particular title, because I had to wonder, the guy broke into the house, took all the trouble to do it. Why did he only take that? Even if it was just for porn, why only that?
Yeah.
So it became almost an obsession for me. When I finally got to the age where I could, buy the stuff for myself, I sought it out and finally got to watch a used copy that I had gotten from a somewhat sleazy dealer. And
like you do.
And I was sitting there thinking to myself, but even while watching it, I still to this day do not quite understand the mystery as to why that one film out of everything there was the one film that he took.
Well, you're talking about
Sentimental attachment?
Maybe there's something there.
But you talk about this interesting aspects of his filmography. Joe D'Amato died at the start of 1999 and had 8 releases in 1999. He really must have been one of those workaholic porn directors. Damn, how many from 98?
Well, and probably a lot of quantity over quality, I'm guessing. I don't know his filmography very well, but from what I heard, it's mostly garbage. Like, this is pretty much his best movie.
Rough.
That joke in Family Guy that made 5, whatever it was.
What the hell was that? I couldn't hear over the sound of
Dane's
someone
breathing.
panting into
Dane,
their mic.
mute your mic.
Later.
Did I screw it up yet again?
Yes,
Yes,
God damn it.
just mute your mic while you're not talking, because we just hear your breath.
Well, let's see here. This came out in what year was this?
1979.
79. Yeah. Oh, he was taking it easy that year. He only did 4 movies.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah, I have not explored his filmography much at all. I mean, obviously, I'm familiar with Dario Argento, Lucio Fulci, Mario Bava, all of those, but Joe D'Amato wasn't one. And of course, this movie went unnoticed by me for years. Nobody I knew ever talked to me about this movie. So, his entire filmography I haven't paid much attention. And I mean, the more I'm learning about it, I guess, like I said, what I hear is that most of it is crap. But I'd be interested, especially in checking out like vintage 70s Italian porn. Like, that's totally up my alley. So I got to get my hands on. Maybe I'll go steal one from Brandon. Break into his house.
All right.
All right. So does anybody have anything else that they want to add before we kind of close it up and do our self promo?
Not that I know.
No. Last call.
Give this movie a try if you can find it in a decent copy. Does this have a good physical release?
Yes, it does.
It does.
Yeah, there's two distributors that have decent ones out. Severin has one, and what's the other one, David?
The other one is I'll just go on here and video it for a moment here so that you can see it. The 88 Films did a cover like this, and normally 88 Films they tend to region lock their movies, but when they did this campaign, they actually unlocked the regions for all who actually were able to take and contribute to the transfer. And what Severin did is they just took the rights to 88 Films and just distributed it on their site. So you're getting nothing different. So all that Severin did was just go over to 88 Films and was like, hey, can we get that transferred? Let's distribute it over here in the U.S.
So get you some Buio Omega, Beyond the Darkness. All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and we can start with Red Raven. Why don't you tell us where you're from, what you do, and how people can find you?
I am a Red Raven, and I book shows in the Milwaukee area, and I'm also a Dead Girl at Deadger's Dark Coffin Classics. And you can find us on vimeo.com/ddcc.
Awesome. Go check her out. And Dustin, why don't you tell everybody where you're from, what you do, and how we can find you?
Well, I live in Milwaukee and collect horror, anything I can get my hands on. I have an Instagram for the collection, DHR Hunter, all one word, which I'm supposed to be posting to soon. I also do another podcast on Thursday nights called Pop Culture Weekly, and it's a bit of a different kind of discussion from like the movie talk here. Like last few weeks, we've been doing like an interview with people, and that gets pretty fun. I'm also in the middle working on launching my own channel. It's actually up right now. It's called The Crypt of Horrors, and there's only one video on there. So my goal for that channel is to have it be a place for both like collecting breakdowns, like I went into town, this is what I found today, reviews of the stuff that I've picked up like after I've had a chance to watch it, and I even want to have some interviews on there. And if not for faulty equipment, I would have had my interview with Tim Seeley, creator of the horror comic Hackslash, up there as my first thing. But we had to reschedule that, and yeah, I'm mad at Skype.
Well, we look forward to that when it finally does happen.
I do too.
Yes. Jake, why don't you tell us where you're from, what you do, and how people can find you?
All right. Well, I'm Kodabuki Jake. I'm from Central Virginia, where I am a very much an enjoyer of all sorts of media, movies, television, graphic novels, books, what have you. And I frequently guest with Brandon on Septum Sin versus the World. Do collaborative videos as well as, and we've got a big one this week, coming out this week, top 15 opening themes for TV shows. So that's going to be fun. And I also do solo videos, and one series that I've just started filming for going to be a huge time suck, and I don't know how long it's going to take to get each video together. I'm in the phase of the first one, but it's on Criterion Films, where I'm trying to hit every aspect of each release, including all the bonus features. And the first one up is a film that we covered here a few weeks ago, Galore, which was a fun one with a few bonus features. And I have my own channel, Kodabuki Jake, that's occasionally updated, and hub pages also, Kodabuki Jake.
Awesome. Sounds like you got some good stuff planned. Brandon, why don't you tell us where you're from, what you do, and how people can find you?
I am a YouTube creator. My channel is Septum Sin versus the World. I talk about physical media principally. We've actually scaled back a little bit this time, though we do still cover physical media releases. We talk about celebrity deaths. We have movie reviews on the channel, and we still do what they call a vlog podcast, really. But we call it the vlogcast, where we talk about the news of the day and things of such. We have fun on our channel, and I encourage anyone to check us out. As Kodabuki Jake had said, we are currently working on a top 15, and matter of fact, edited 8 of the 15 entries today, so hope to get that up fairly soon.
Excellent, thanks. How about you, Dane? Why don't you let us know where you're from, what you do, and how people can find you?
Well, when I'm not accidentally breathing into the mic or letting my background noise affect the podcast, I make independent films in Charlotte, North Carolina, and currently working on getting a short film done and in time to be submitted to a horror anthology called Creepypasta, which is made by the same people who did Grindsploitation, Clownsploitation, Meltsploitation, all that stuff.
All kinds of exploitation.
Absolutely. And all the preparations are being made, and I'll be able to shoot it and hopefully get it done right before the deadline. And hopefully it gets in. And, that's something that's primarily what it's taking the focus right now. And then working on getting my girlfriend's web series, Asylum Origins Harley, the fan series, getting that done. And then, getting feature film scripts written and vetted by friends just to figure out what they need before moving to next stages. Just a lot of stuff going on.
Excellent. Sounds like you're keeping busy.
Trying to.
Yes, David, our usual host, why don't you tell us where you're from, what you do, and how people can find you?
Well, I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I run or have run Movies Galore Milwaukee, which is a blog here in Milwaukee. And I also do reviews as well as discuss films with you guys here on Inside Movies Galore, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. I'm also a producer on the side, so definitely check out some of the projects that I have backed. So, including Wrestle Massacre, which came out about a month ago. So, definitely check that out, and we'll see what's up the road and down around the corner with Dana and myself. So.
Cool. Sounds good. And as always, I'm Katie Cadaver from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm a body positive horror artist and alternative model when I'm not guesting as your host here on Inside Movies Galore. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon. And I'm also the makeup artist for the horror punk band Ratbat Spider. And you can find them at ratbatspider.bandcamp.com. And I'm a Dead Girl for Digger's Dark Coffin Classics. And you can find Digger's Dark Coffin Classics and Ratbat Spider and myself all at Wendigo Fest this weekend, October 5th through the 7th in downtown Manitowoc, Wisconsin. It's a festival of folklore, freaks, and all things Halloween. And Ratbat Spider is going to be playing on Saturday night at 5 p.m., and then directly following that at 7:06 p.m. is the parade. And you'll be able to see Ratbat Spider in the parade. We've got something exciting planned for that. So come out to Wendigo Fest. That's this weekend, October 5th through the 7th in downtown Manitowoc. You can see Deadger's Dark Coffin Classics there all 3 days. Various Dead Girls will be there. I also perform and produce for the Grindhouse Tees Burlesque Collaborative, and you can find us on Facebook. We are also going to be doing a show on Saturday, October 20th at Frank's Power Plant. It's actually my birthday show. It's Katie Cadaver's Birthday Spectacular, so I'd love to celebrate my birthday with you all. There's going to be burlesque by Grindhouse Tees and music by Night of Cup, Primal Enemy, The Living Dead Kennedys, and The Radiations. That's Saturday, October 20th at Frank's Power Plant in Milwaukee. And I'm also a Tromet with Trauma Entertainment. And you can find all the best trauma stuff at trauma.com. And finally, I'm an editor for Movies Galore of Milwaukee. And I've been working on helping get some things organized for the podcast. We're currently getting our October list of films finalized. I believe we already have next week's film lined up, which is Pumpkinhead, actually.
Yeah.
So that's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. I have not sat down and watched Pumpkinhead all the way through, so I'm excited to do that.
You haven't?
So yeah,
Like,
that's what I've been. No, I know.
Pumpkinhead's one of the very first, I didn't get to see a whole lot of, legit horror growing up, but Pumpkinhead's one of the ones that I saw. I saw that movie very early in life, and I've always loved Pumpkinhead.
It's on my shame list for being a movie that I have not completely watched, so I'm very much looking forward to getting it off of there.
I guess I haven't seen Carrie, I suppose. I don't know.
That's fair. Yeah, you can put that one on your list. So, all right. Well, everybody, please remember to like us on Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and share us with your friends.
Do it.
And
Yay.
say good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.